Hello dear friends, you are on the Ruslan Belov channel, and this is the daily review of the Ukrainian front. Well, the battles go on, and we continue to analyze the situation at the front. So friends, yesterday Zelensky once again showed off, declaring that the Ukrainian armed forces are smashing the Russian army near Pokrovsk and advancing successfully in Sumy. We will discuss later where and how exactly they are smashing the Russian army. But here's the interesting part. Why did he shyly keep silent about the situation in the Lyman sector, in the Dnipropetrovsk region, and in Zaporizhia? Let's begin with that. We'll move from south to north, starting with the southern part of the Zaporizhia region. Over the past 24 hours, Russian forces advanced 800 meters inside the residential area of the settlement of Primorske. This is a large, indeed a very large village, stretching along the reservoir. You see, in some places, an 800-meter gain in residential development could mean a third or even half the entire village. But here, it's just a drop in the ocean, because the settlement stretches nearly 12 kilometers in length. Nevertheless, the fighting here is incredibly fierce, literally for every meter. The troops have to bite in and battle for each house. Their own men are driven forward in waves, sent to die in packs. Recently, Siversk removed the commander of a Ukrainian armed forces corps stationed here. One of the reasons for his dismissal was that he had thrown away hundreds, if not thousands, of soldiers without achieving any result. The outcome, or rather the lack of it, is clear in the footage. To summarize this sector, fighting continues, fighting is heavy, and there will be no quick results. I will put it this way. Capturing Primorske and Stepnohirsk should not be expected before the end of the year, more likely January or February of 2026. The area is simply too difficult. The AFU are throwing everything they have into the fire because they know that the fall of Stepnohirsk and Primorske would bring Russian forces to the line Malokaterynivka-Hryhorivka. And you know what that means. You can see it clearly on the map yourselves. Reaching Hryhorivka would mean a direct road to Zaporizhia, literally a straight road with no settlements in the way. That is why what we see here is essentially the decisive battle for access to Zaporizhia. Well, the general battle will come once Russian troops reach Hryhorivka and Malokaterynivka, but for now this is the prelude to that decisive fight. The AFU are burning through reserves to hold these lines. Yet slowly, painfully, the Russian troops keep moving forward. The situation is very different in the area of responsibility of the Vostok grouping. There, the AFU have suffered complete collapse and defeat. The fighters of the Vostok grouping have completed the battle for the village of Beryozov. This settlement, large by local standards, has come under full Russian control. Yesterday, objective control footage showed Russian flags in 5 different locations, confirming the total capture. Thus, the 13th settlement in the Dnipropetrovsk region is now under Russian control. What does that mean? It means that Russian forces in the Dnipropetrovsk region now control as many settlements as in the Sumy region, and soon they will control even more. Over the past day, they advanced 600 meters from Novonikolayevka and reached the very outskirts of the village of Kalinivske. Russian positions are now just 300 meters from its eastern edge. Local reports even say our troops have already entered the village and fighting is ongoing there. That's one point. Another, after the capture of Beryozov, the advance clearly won't stop. The next objective is Stepov, which is less than 1.5 kilometers away. Stepov is a tiny village, practically indefensible. There's simply nothing substantial to hold on to, especially with Russian forces pressing in from a larger neighboring settlement where resources and manpower can be built up. So there's every chance that by the end of the month, 2 more villages in the Dnipropetrovsk region will fall under Russian control. So what is happening here overall? A key battle is approaching for 2 major strongholds. Uspenivka with its cluster of nearby villages, what I call the Uspenivka rural agglomeration, and Poltavka. If the front straightens along this line and these settlements come under Russian control, the entire Huliaipol grouping of the AFU is doomed. That is the main objective of this advance, the destruction of the Huliaipol grouping. Now, back to Zelensky's claims that the AFU are crushing us near Pokrovsk. Well, what about this? Russian troops advanced more than 2 kilometers in the past 24 hours and broke into Novopavlivka, managing to seize its central part immediately. Fighting continues, with the goal of fully clearing the AFU from the settlement. If successful, Russian units will straighten the line and link up with other positions south of Pokrovsk, setting the stage for the battle over the multi-story neighborhoods, Lazurny, Yuzhny, Shakhtarsky, and Solnechny. Capturing them will greatly simplify the assault on Pokrovsk, leaving mostly private housing blocks to clear. Progress has also been made in the Lyman sector, or perhaps it's more accurate to call it the Izium sector now. Russian forces crossed the Nitras River and captured the village of Seredny on the far bank. This is the first settlement taken on the other side of the river. Strictly speaking, this is no longer the Lyman direction, since beyond this point there are no major settlements until Izium, except perhaps Oskil, and even that only counts as large with some generosity. The situation is becoming very interesting. If Russian forces also take Kharkivka, they can advance toward Rubtsi from two directions. Chandriholov has finally been fully cleared, with Russian units now firmly on the Nitras. Fighting is ongoing near Derelov and continues in Zarechne. Let's move on. Kharkiv region. Yesterday, Zelensky declared that the AFU would destroy the entire Russian army in Kupiansk. What can one even say? Let's see at year's end who destroys whom and under whose control Kupiansk will be. Now about Sumy. Zelensky is lying again, claiming continuous advances. But where? Show me. Their last advance was 2 weeks ago, 600 meters through this forest strip. That's it. In the past 2 weeks, no progress at all. Remember, Zelensky promised in August that by mid-October the AFU would fully drive Russian troops out of the Sumy region. 3 weeks remain. Do you think they'll succeed? Of course not. Not even by year's end. The Russian army isn't advancing here because units were redeployed to more important sectors in Donetsk. But enough forces remain to hold the line, and they are doing so confidently. To sum up, over the past 24 hours, Russian forces have taken control of 2 villages and 17 square kilometers. Now let's look at the political arena. Oil and gas are once again at the center of discussions about war and peace. Not as mere commodities, but as the key to power, sovereignty, and future budgets. The dynamics are being set by Washington in the person of Donald Trump, who has sharply increased pressure on Europe. His demands are simple. First, accelerate the EU's rejection of Russian energy. Second, impose tariffs against China and India, who continue buying Russian oil. On the first point, Brussels has effectively agreed, signing contracts to purchase $250 billion worth of American oil and LNG. Dodging this under the pretext of free enterprise will be nearly impossible. On the second point, however, there is hesitation. Imposing tariffs on 2 of the EU's largest trade partners, besides the US itself, would mean deliberately stepping between hammer and anvil, hoping the steel will spare you. It will not. The European economy cannot withstand the double blow, rising energy costs on one side and retaliatory measures from Asia on the other. For Trump, pressuring Europe pays off in every way. First, driving Moscow out of the European oil and gas market gives US companies monopoly access. This isn't geopolitics for its own sake. It's contracts and LNG terminals in the Gulf of Mexico filled to capacity. Second, it creates an extra bargaining chip with Moscow over control of traditional routes, Nord Streams, Yamal Europe, Druzhba, and others. Translated from diplomacy into business, Trump wants a share in the delivery chain of Russian fuel to Europe, giving his producers flexibility. If European demand slumps, these routes provide leverage to redistribute flows, tariffs, and margins. That's the minimum program. The maximum program is to drag Europe into economic confrontation with China under the slogan of punishing Russia. The scenario would be the EU speeds up its brake with Russian energy, restricts imports of Indian and Turkish fuel made from Russian crude, and raises tariffs on Chinese goods. In practice, this would mean suicide for European industry. Raw materials costlier, components costlier, export markets cut off. The result is clear. Whoever claims victory will celebrate among Europe's ruins. The paradox of the moment is that even within American energy capital, Russia appears both as a problem and as an opportunity. Publicly, ExxonMobil CEO Darren Woods tells the Financial Times that the company has no plans to return to Russia. focusing only on talks about $4.6 billion worth of frozen assets. But another story runs in parallel, reports of secret contacts between Exxon and Rosneft, a meeting between Neil Chapman and Igor Sechin in Doha, a positive signal from Washington about possible return to Sakhalin. This is the reality where business logic need not match public statements. It's not about whether Exxon specifically returns. The point is that American energy architects are not burning bridges completely. They're dismantling them section by section, leaving the option of rebuilding if the market turns. Japan is also woven into this picture, not as a bystander. Tokyo rejected the idea of raising tariffs on Russian molecules re-exported to third countries, citing commitments within the long-defunct WTO. Formally, it looks like legal pedantry. In substance, it's about defending its strategic stake in LNG, especially the Sakhalin II project. Within Europe, politics is splitting into core and periphery. Slovakia and Hungary hope Trump's threats are just negotiating tactics. Without alternative infrastructure, talk of abandoning Russian energy is talk of industrial death. Inside the EU, there's a battle over timelines. After meeting Trump, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced an accelerated plan to abandon Russian fuels and a new sanctions package. But the bureaucratic machine faltered. The release was postponed indefinitely, and instead of one unified yes, negotiations began over exceptions. For Hungary, for Slovakia. The systemic problem is that markets have already learned to circumvent linear bans. While regulators draft 200 pages of exceptions, traders find new routes and payment schemes overnight. Industry, desperate for predictability, chooses today's gas over tomorrow's promises. And Russia? It is both target of pressure and indispensable piece of the puzzle. Infrastructure built over decades doesn't vanish with a press release. American LNG can do much, but it doesn't cancel geography, seasonality, or the last-mile problem. Nor does it save European industry from the massive costs of transition. Hence the leaks about secret talks. This is no longer about ideology or Nobel Peace Prizes for Trump, but about deals and profits. Energy has once again become the primary factor in strategic choice. Not a decorative policy tool, but the backbone of policy itself. Europe stands at a crossroads where both paths lead through pain. A rapid break with Russian resources, combined with tariff war against Asia, means a devastating blow to its industry right now. A slow break means life on the edge of sanctions regimes, endless exceptions to exceptions, and loss of bargaining power with Washington. America, acting tough and pragmatic, makes no secret of its goal: to redirect global energy demand toward its own producers while binding allies to its infrastructure. Asia, especially China and India, seizes the opportunities of price arbitrage, fighting for discounts. Russia, isolated yet indispensable, continues to use the art of the possible to strengthen its economy and pursue victory in the war. And for now, oil and gas are once again at the heart of geopolitics, and they will remain there for a long time. This situation clearly shows that the Ukrainian front is now entering a new decisive phase. Every day, the battles are not only about villages and kilometers on the map, but also about the future balance of power in the entire region. The West continues to pour resources into Ukraine, but the cost of this strategy is growing, both financially and politically. How long will Europe be able to sustain these losses while its own industries are collapsing under energy pressure? On the battlefield, the Russian army is slowly but steadily gaining ground. No matter how many optimistic statements come from Kiev, the map and the footage of captured settlements speak louder than words. So the question remains, who will be able to withstand the coming winter? Ukraine, which is exhausting its reserves, or Russia, which is building up momentum step by step? One thing is certain, the coming months will be decisive, not only for the outcome of the fighting in Donbas and Zaporizhzhia, but also for the future of Europe's geopolitical course. That's all for today's update, my friends. Thank you for staying with me and following these daily reports. If you watch my videos regularly but haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. By doing so, you're helping the channel grow and making it possible to keep bringing you these frontline analyses every day. Take care of yourselves, stay informed, and see you later with the next update.